care about and love, but wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity, and make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
Hi. All right. So hi, beautiful people. Thank you so much for being here. If you've never been in here before, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I come on, I talk to people that are doing things to empower the lives of others. And I do that by sharing their story. I always feel like there's something powerful when you realize you're not alone. I really don't believe we're supposed to do life alone. But unfortunately, we can get in our negative thoughts and then start to feel alone. And so that's why I started this podcast. Now, the podcast was originally just an audio podcast. Pandemic happened, and then I decided to bring it on video platform. So if you do listen to podcasts and you want to search for the podcast, all you got to do is find Celeste the Therapist podcast, and you'll find it streaming on all podcasting platforms. And before I bring on my special guest, I wanted to show you this wellness role assessment. If you go to my website, celestethetherapist.com, celestethetherapist.com, you can find a link to this. It's free. And all I do is just really break down these areas. One of the things that happens in life is that we get stuck and we don't know like where to start. And I think that if we can start to assess our lives and kind of break it down, it'll give us a starting point. And with that starting point, we can actually start to create a plan to create like positive changes. That's important. So I'm excited. I'm going to bring on my special guest. I follow his account. And so I was like, can you please come on? And he said yes.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I got to put my gadgets on, you know, like I've been working hard to get these gadgets going. So I got to put the gadgets on.
I love it. I love it. It's really, it's like swanky. It's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm excited that you're here. So can you just introduce yourself to my audience before I get too like psyched out right now?
Oh, you're awesome. I'm Nick Emeigh. I'm the Director of Outreach and Development for NAMI, and I'm based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. So the reason why I'm excited is because mental health is like a big passion of mine. And one of the organizations that I've always talked about is NAMI. And can you explain to people what that stands for?
Sure. NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's the nation's largest grassroots organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness. And then we have local chapters all over the country and in some other countries as well. And locally, we're dedicated to improving lives through education, advocacy, and support.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And so one of the things as I started the podcast, I said, you know, I feel like we can't, it's hard to do life alone. And I feel like NAMI offers that support. I think about the people that may have family members and things like that and not knowing like who to talk to and then have this like amazing organization. I think it's great. Can you talk to people a little bit about how you got involved in NAMI and what your role is there?
Sure. So I, for a very long time, obviously, like everyone with a mental health condition, since I was little, struggled with my mental health and didn't always know what that was. It's hard to know that you live with a mental health condition if you don't know a lot about your brain or mental health or what it is, and nobody talks about it. So.
Yeah.
So, I struggled for a long time and, got through high school and middle school and elementary school being bullied, got to college and realized I had an issue. I dealt with my mental health issues, negatively. So with, using drugs and alcohol sometimes, and, then tried to hide that. just the pressure of trying to live secret lives and repress the things that were in me and in my brain just got to me. And what happens is you break. And I broke after my mom passed away. I went and got help. And I was so ashamed of it that I kept stopping treatment. I would stop therapy. I would stop taking medication. And, after several suicide attempts, I finally, after my dad then passed away, went and got help with my sister's assistance. The last little bit of love that she had for me, she took me to the hospital. And in there, the last time, I thought, I bet everybody else is ashamed of this too. And, I looked around and I thought, I'm not crazy. We're not crazy. Crazy doesn't exist. It's just that sometimes life is really hard and sometimes your brain attacks you. You don't know what to do. And you don't always make the right choices. And we all, ended up here in the hospital. So what I noticed was that not everyone can speak for themselves. So I left the hospital and I lived in a recovery house for a while. And because it's just, I had nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I found NAMI through a friend of mine who spoke for the in-school program called Ending the Silence. And
Mm-hmm.
I went and I interviewed, and she said, "You should tell your story." I said, "God, no, no, And I mean, you're supposed to, like, we were, before we went live, we were talking about normal. You're supposed to look normal and act normal, and so that's not normal. So I said no, and then I went and I interviewed, and I told the truth for the very first time.
Wow.
And our Ending the Silence coordinator, Lori, she's how I got involved, really. She didn't bat an eyelash. She just said, "That's a good story and welcome to our team." And I thought, oh my God. I said, what did I get myself into? And so that's how I started. And I told my story in schools to kids, and they started coming up and saying, "Hey, me too. I live with this too. And you don't look crazy. And you went and got help. So maybe I should get help." And I thought, I'm doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And our executive director, Debbie, she's still my boss now. She's awesome. I was good at things. And as I was into my recovery, like graphic design and social media and things like that, she gave it to me and she said, run with it. And no one ever said, you shouldn't do this stuff because you're sick or you're crazy or, you have not so great past, So I got into it that way, and I saw what NAMI did, and I saw what was there, and I saw what was possible, and everyone was very supportive of all of the things I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, I was the director of outreach and development, doing lots of things and all the things. So, I mean, NAMI is a peer-led organization, which means like it's family members and people like me living with it. And to be honest with you, that's the best type of person who should advocate for you and support you. So
Absolutely. I
that's the story.
agree. That is an amazing story. I appreciate you for sharing that on here.
Of
As you
course.
started at the beginning of saying, like, you're living with something that you're dealing with and don't have the words or knowledge behind what it is. And I think that's one of the most powerful things we could do is tap into like our inside and start naming it. And if you're like a parent listening to this, give your kids an outlet to name it. You start naming it because it's real.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, it's only so much we can take, and nobody knows when their breaking point is. So it doesn't make sense to play Russian roulette. It's like, let's start naming what we're dealing with. Let's start normalizing it, which is why I started this podcast, is to normalize mental health. So that's why, like, you being here and sharing your story in NAMI is like exciting for me. Now, NAMI does amazing things, and it's based around mental health. Now, this is pandemic starts to happen, right? It's March. I hear like all of these things happening, and everyone's talking about like how to wash their hands. And my first thought was like, oh my gosh, mental health.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be isolated. How has that affected or changed or enhanced, or what has happened with your role ever since this has happened?
I think it all kind of depends on how you look at it. When this first happened, I was committed to having our support groups anyway, proceeding through it, because I knew this would have, really dangerous effects on people's mental health. And, if you've ever been through depression or, a break or burnout or extreme stress, that being, secluded anywhere, it reminds you of going through that. So I've been through major depressions where I was in situations like this where I didn't leave the house for how many months now? 3 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this feels like to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, we moved our support groups online, and I stomped my feet and I said, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how it's going to look, but we did it anyway. And I put the groups up on Zoom with the team. And I'll always remember, I get to do this stuff, but we have an amazing team behind me, and we have amazing volunteers. And we all work together to get at least 2 or 3 support groups every day online.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Go ahead.
It's cool. People need it. So we put them online, and at first it was like, what is this going to look like?
Yeah.
And then we had a young lady come into the room the very first day we did the groups, and she had survived a major suicide attempt, and she was in the hospital. And I looked up, I saw her come in the room, and she just said, I saw your support groups on Instagram. She's from Bucks County. And she said, I needed to come in and talk about this, and I haven't been before. And I thought, well, we're on the right track, because she wouldn't have been able to come to an in-person support group. So I was inspired, and so we put peer support groups, family support groups, our LGBTQ plus support groups, our youth support groups, meditation groups, music groups, movie nights, game nights. Now we're going to introduce some African American specific support groups. Provider support groups, suicide loss survivor support groups, alternatives to suicide support groups online. And so far, we've seen over 4,000 people come through our
Nick,
our
you're
Zoom
lying.
account.
That's crazy.
It's cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so, while the pandemic has, let's just say it sucks. It sucks. But some people don't like that word, but I can't think of a more accurate word.
No, it sucks. You're right.
Some really cool things have come of it, and people are talking about how they feel. They are realizing that peer support is working for them. We have kind of built a community online on Zoom. And I couldn't really ask for a better outcome from this, honestly. And it's been tough. I mean, we have some really tough, conversations, some heavy groups where everybody is feeling the same way about this being difficult to maneuver. And, what do you do when your self-care strategies stop working? And what do you do when all the tools in your toolbox get rusty and old, and you're sick of everything, So we talk about all that stuff in the groups, and, and we built social media platform forums, and people are reaching out. So, our small but mighty team has been very busy.
Yes. Okay. So that it's been busy, but a lot of people are coming through. You're seeing more people. More people have options to actually be at a support group,
Yep.
which is amazing.
Absolutely. It is. I couldn't ask for anything more than that.
How do you debrief from all of that? Because that's a lot. I said, I went from being a therapist and helping people through something that I'm not in the middle of, right? And now, like, I'm helping them navigate through a pandemic as I'm navigating through a pandemic. So it feels like it just feels a little bit more challenging. So I'm curious about, what do you do to like debrief? Because that's a lot of that's a lot. A lot of times we're just kind of helping them manage because there's not many options.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to say, I'm a professional and I should be able to just deal with this. And, from being a therapist and doing all this, that, when the group ends or when the session ends, it doesn't end in your brain and you can't just turn it off. I don't stop thinking about our support group participants and everything. So, we debrief as a team, and we get together and kind of just, support each other. And then lots of self-care. I mean, self-care in this quarantine, I mean, it's you're more limited, but I mean, still going outside, making sure I'm outside. Little things like mowing the lawn is I just have to break and do that. We give ourselves, time and just leeway, just to be human beings. And sometimes after a really heavy group, it's just, we have to just say, wow, this wouldn't affect me so deeply if I didn't feel it too at some level. So we acknowledge that and we debrief with each other. And taking baths, like baths are like, I'm sick of this room, I'm sick of the living room, I'm sick of everything in the house, so I take a bath and put headphones on. So, good self-care, and self-care is different for everybody, and depending on where you live, you might not be able to walk around the neighborhood all the time or whatever. So do what you can, just do what you can, and don't apologize, and good boundaries, and making sure that, if I say I'm going to end the day at a certain point, that I end the day, and it's difficult to do. And that's why we're also, this Friday, actually, we're starting our provider and professional support group, and I wanted to do that because I know, we work with our local behavioral health and mental health professionals, and I know that it's really hard right now. I know it's hard for you as a therapist to help people through this when you're going through it. So, and I need it. I need that group too. So we're going to start a support group just for us on Friday.
That's awesome.
We need it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I love it. I love it. Now, y'all, NAMI, pandemic happens. You guys are building these support groups. Now, racism happens. Not that racism hasn't already been here, but it's like in your face, and now everybody is stuck at home, and there's not a lot of distractions. So now everybody's forced to see it. How has like NAMI Bucks PA responded, or is there anything that you guys have thought about to kind of help navigate this time for people?
Yeah, so what we've seen in our support groups especially is that when you come in and you want peer support, just like when you're looking for a therapist, you want someone maybe who looks like you, or who, without a ton of explanation, knows where you've been and can support you from there without you having to put work into it.
Right.
So, when people come into our support groups, and they happen to be, people of color, African American, Black individuals. And maybe they're one of two or three in the room. It's not the same as if you know that you're going to come into a room of people who are just like you and know what you've been through without a lot of explanation. Now, I'm obviously an ally, but that also isn't the same thing. So, we're putting together an African American specific support group. Other NAMIs have put together groups for people of color in general. I think right now, maybe we'll do that, but right now, we needed to do an African American specific support group, because peer support means peer support.
Yeah.
So, I can be a fierce ally all day long, but I'm not going to give you the best support, So we have peers that are trained and are going to lead that group starting in July, which is Minority Mental Health Month, which is it happened by luck, but I just didn't want to have to. I didn't want people to have to defend themselves in a support group. And I mean, and I didn't want to have to spend a whole group, talking about race and racism, I mean, although it's necessary, and there's lots more that we are going to do and that we need to do. But people are tired, and you want to come to a group and get support and not, have to be an activist or whatever in the group. So we're doing that. We have a full program called Bridges to Hope, and that's kind of an education program on mental health for the Black community, and that's also peer-led. So there's lots that we're doing. We also issued a resolution against racism, because lots of people, I don't think that people understand how racism really affects mental health. I think I understand it and you understand it, but not everyone does.
So heavy, Nick. It's so heavy.
I just, and then, it's also easy to say, not say anything and just assume that people do understand that that's a mental health issue. And a barrier to getting treatment, and a barrier to talking openly about what you've been through and what you're going through. So we put it into a resolution. I posted it all over our social media and everything. We can't ignore that. We just can't. So there's lots that NAMI needs to do to be better as an organization in terms of, being diverse and inclusive, and just, to address people as peers. Get people what they really need to if we promise that we're going to help people build a better life, then that means everybody. And one thing doesn't work the same way for everybody.
Yes.
So.
And I'm sure you've seen, because I've worked in the field for a long time, and I know that you've heard stories about when it comes to treatment, it's not always a direct link to like, okay, I just do this and do that. There's so many hurdles, and depending on your insurance and your location, how do you help people kind of navigate that? Because that's one of the reasons why I kind of started this podcast, is because I wanted people to know, you're right, sometimes it's not direct.
Yeah. It's so indirect. And systems were built the way they were intentionally built the way that they currently are. So you have to think about that. Lots of people say, systems are broken, but they were built this way. So, NAMI acts as navigators too. So we help people to navigate. And sometimes it really is different for every single person, where they get help, how, the things that are available to them. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. So it's complicated. And what's the last thing you want to do when you need mental health help is figure out the system.
I know.
So it's rough. It really is. That can break you in and of itself. So we help people to navigate, people who don't have insurance, and just sometimes people just don't know what happens if you ask for help. Like, sometimes people think that they get locked up, and also, sometimes people have families that aren't supportive and they really can't say anything to them. So we're your family. So you have family that you're born with, and then you have family that you choose. And so we're your family for a little bit while we help you navigate that and beyond, because then hopefully you stay involved with us. And then, insurance is interesting. The system is interesting. And then what's even more interesting, if we're still talking about racial disparities, is that how easy it is to find a Celeste, how
Yes.
easy it is
Yeah.
and I've talked to people on the phone that said, I am a person of color, and I have searched for years for a therapist who knows what I've gone through, or, knows what I'm talking about when I talk. And that shouldn't be that way either. So one of the goals of the that support group that we're starting, the African American support group, is to make sure that we know and we have in a database everyone who fits the bill when we need to refer to an organization or an independent provider or whatever. So but that's what we're here for.
Yes.
I mean, if we can make it easier, then people are more likely to get help that they need.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning the part about, you might not have family that supports you, or you may think, because I've had people think that, if they say like they don't want to be here, that they immediately get locked up and there's no procedure. I think we've all had times where we don't feel like we want to be here, but we haven't planned anything. And so there's this misconception of the services available. Like, there's therapy, there's day programs, right? There's support groups that we refer people to. It's not always immediate inpatient unit. And so like educating people around like the options that are available, along with letting people know like this is what's happening. When I worked in emergency rooms, and to just give people a name, and the way that their face lit up, it was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, if you can name it, then you can actually start to deal with it. If I'm struggling with depression and anxiety and I don't have a name for it, but I'm feeling all this stuff happening, it's going to be hard for me to feel like I'm going to be okay. So I just love everything that you are doing and that you guys stand for. I think that's amazing.
Thanks. I mean, it helps me too. And the same way I got involved, other people, I really, encourage people to try and get involved. And, when you're feeling okay, after we give you the help and everything, just, get trained and be a support group facilitator, volunteer, just get involved, because purpose is really important in recovery too. And so that, and I wanted to talk about people who live with not wanting to be here anymore. That's not against the law. And it's also really not uncommon. We have a whole support group for that called Alternatives to Suicide. And, we work backwards from, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to give up. I'm done. And so what solution does suicide, fulfill? Well, like, what does that do? How does that help? And then they say why, and then we work back from there, to what the actual issue is. And sometimes it's a real issue, and sometimes it's something that's perceived, but we work together on that. And for someone else to say in the group, oh my gosh, you know what? I thought the same thing. I went through the same thing. Here's what happened, and now I'm okay. Or, I went and talked to a therapist, or I went and, got treatment, and this is what that was like, and now I'm okay. It's really scary when you feel like you're a monster, or that you're insane and that you're gonna get locked up somewhere, or that maybe you don't deserve any help, or that you just don't have the energy to do anything but say, I'm done, I'm over it, I'm done, that's it. So, then we take it from there.
Yes, that's good. And I think that, that little thought that you just mentioned starts off like, I love analogies, but like there'll be this little thought, right? And without the support group and you're isolated by yourself, like it just keeps growing, right? It starts to become this big thought that is so profound and it feels so real. And you start to believe it. And I think that's why, getting involved, and even when you're feeling better, still stay involved because you're feeling better because of the support. And that's the cycle I think people get into, is that, they start and then they stop because it's like, I'm good, but you're good because of the support. So
right. Yeah. I mean, feels real good when, you've been given some help and then you learn how to give it to somebody else. I mean, when people are going through a really tough time, you don't always want to hear from somebody who hasn't been there that, hey, it's going to be okay, it's going to get better. And you think in your head, like, what do you know?
Exactly.
You don't know. You haven't been there. And, we can honestly say, like, I've been there. And, the best example I have to give anybody or to show anybody that, things really do get better after they suck, and after, after it's rough and after it's painful. And then, just you have a few days where you don't think about things as much anymore and you start to feel like yourself. And then, I'm the example that, there's life after this stuff, and it's not the limited life that you think it might be with a mental health condition. There's, I do a lot of what I want.
Yeah, you do a lot.
I mean, things get better. It doesn't stay that way forever, but take it from somebody who's been there. I've been there.
And that's why what you do is so important. And I'm so grateful that you came on here to share all of these amazing things. And now that, you're online, everybody listening to this can actually tap into it.
Yep. So hopefully, any of the new programs that I talked about, most of them are either started or they're starting in the beginning of July. But it doesn't matter where you're from. I'm based here in Bucks County, but we have people. Last night we did a support group for survivors of suicide loss. We had people from all over the place come in there. We have people from California, New Jersey, Florida, Ohio.
Awesome. Oh my gosh.
Sure.
Thank you. So if people wanted to learn about the groups, where should I direct them?
Sure. It's on our website, namibuckspa.org. And if you want the support group specifically, it's namibuckspa.org/online support. And you register for them on there and everything like that. If you have questions, my email is on there. I mean, we're just a bunch of people who really care a lot. People of all different ages and backgrounds and colors, and we're an organization just full of people who care and want to help.
You're an organization full of amazing people. Like, you guys are amazing. Like, every time I meet people that are in the same field as I am and just as passionate, I'm just like, I just feel my heart melts, because I think this is what we need. And it's going to help make some positive changes and impact in people's lives. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to share with my audience? You've shared so much. I'm grateful.
No, just if no one's told you yet today that they love you, I do, and that there's help, there's hope, and until there's a cure, there's NAMI.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
it.
Thank you, Nick. I love you. I appreciate
Love you too.
Keep doing what you're doing, NAMI Man.
Thank you. I sure will.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you again.
Oh, I love him. He's so amazing. If you just came in, this is a podcast. I stream it on video, and I talk to people that are empowering other people. My goal is to help people shift the way they think, to give people hope. And so I'm just grateful that, people like him and NAMI are around, because I think that when you realize, what he does, he's a peer support. So he has lived experience and he shares it with people, and people start to realize, okay, like, I'm okay. There's like, I'm going to be okay. And when you're going to be okay, when that, I need is a little bit of hope to keep going. And I think NAMI gives you that. So NAMI is across the country. I didn't realize they were in some other countries. So definitely Google NAMI in your area to find the chapter near you. But if you enjoy any of the groups he's talking about, you can tap into him online, even if you're not in his state, which is amazing. So definitely check them out, NAMIBooksPA.org. This episode is going to be on the podcast. Thank you guys so much for rocking with me and listening to his story. If you want to follow me on social media, all you got to do is go to Celeste the Therapist. If you want to learn more, go to celestetherapist.com. And hey, Todd, go to celestetherapist.com. And I will see you guys tomorrow.
Life that I care about and love, but wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity, and make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit, and you